Hi guys, so I am back and we are going to continue on our little journey. We were having some hypothetical analysis, bit of role play, looking into whether any of the side actors involved in this lawsuit were, potentially have crossed lines which could, open them up to hypothetical claims, shall we say, of tortious interference. We have already covered Colleen Hoover, we've covered Taylor Swift, and we've covered Matt and Lucy Damon. I think Matt and Lucy Damon were the surprise, because I think a lot of people missed the detail in that text message to Taylor Swift where it was revealed that they had actually contacted Tim Rothman, the CEE of Sony, and specifically asked that the contractual obligation to to hold a bake-off just be overridden, and that's not a small thing, that's huge. So we are now going to continue looking at any potential tortious interference claims, and we're going to be looking at WME. And for this one, I'm going to be using very heavily, actually, my friend Asshole Media's timeline, because she has just put it all together in such a beautiful timeline, and it saves like bobbing around and going through the exhibits and trying to put it all in place. She's already done that. Huge help. Thank you so much to her. And I will put a link to her timeline as well in the comments, so definitely go and have a look at that, because it really does paint the picture. It's incredible. And I'm particularly grateful for all the work that she puts into all of this. So we're going to be starting down the same kind of path as I have for the others. The first element under California law is, was there a valid contract? So it's up on screen already. And, I'm aware that I have shown this now 4 videos in a row. But again, if we're looking at these as individuals. So we have to satisfy each element each time. But again, just for the purposes of, was there a valid contract in place? Yes, there was this one. This is between Wayfair and Sony. However, I've already said, well, there may well be other contracts as well that we are not aware of. They're possibly between Justin Baldoni and Colleen Hoover over the book rights, between Wayfarer and Justin Baldoni over the adaptation of those book rights, because I believe Justin Baldoni purchased them as an individual, not in his capacity as Wayfarer, as the head of Wayfarer. The emails were, him dealing as an individual. There would definitely be something between Wayfarer and Justin Baldoni, potentially in his capacity as a director, and then something else again, similar to Lively's actor loan-out agreement, where, Justin Baldoni is an actor. He will want, a written contract, and may well need it actually for, to comply with the guilds for his acting services, which will detail his remuneration, his benefits, expenses, his rights over his likeness and his name, and etc., promotional obligations, all of that. So there will be undoubtedly a written contract somewhere, because it wouldn't just be right, well, I'm head of CEO, I'm going to go and act in this film, and it'll there'll be there won't be just a trust me bro deal. There'll be something written which will be formal and legally binding, but we have not seen these. What I'm doing is I'm assuming they exist, but I'm concentrating predominantly on the agreement between Wayfarer and Sony specifically for this purpose, because we know that exists, it's in front of us, and no one else was signatory. So anyone we're looking at here, Taylor Swift was not signatory, Matt and Lucy Damon were not signatory. WME were not signatories. So this is an agreement purely between Sony and Wayfarer. Okay. So would WME be aware of this? That's the second element. And the answer is categorically yes. Yes, they would have. WME represented Wayfarer. They represented Justin Baldoni. So yeah, they knew that this contract existed. They would have been aware of a bake-off, right? So for that purpose, yes. They would have also been aware of any contracts between Wayfarer and Justin Baldoni. They more than likely would have also been aware of any contract potentially between Colleen Hoover and Justin Baldoni. And because they're kind of uniquely exposed in a sense, because WME represented both sides. They also represented Blake Lively. So they would have been aware of, and they were aware because they partially negotiated it, her agreements and contracts, her obligations. So having that knowledge, yes, they were aware. There's absolutely no doubt they were aware of the various contracts. So did they commit any intentional acts designed to induce breach or disruption? Now, again, we haven't seen any contracts between Blake Lively or Justin Baldoni with WME. So this is limited knowledge, and I'm just operating on what is available. And this is just my opinion as well, very much my opinion. Other people may have a completely different opinion, and that's fine. This is where we go to the timeline and start looking at what communications do we have. And this is one of the earliest ones. This is a text exchange with Blake Lively's manager, Justin Stone, and her agent from WME, Warren Zavala. Now remember, Warren Zavala is Blake Lively's agent at WME. Danny Greenberg is Justin Baldoni's. And I won't go through these word for word because I've already done that. But basically, to summarize, this is the messages where Blake Lively is saying, I need them to push back the body shoots. I need them to delay the body shoots. And from here on in, she went out of her way to delay the body shoots, getting sick several times over, not coming back to set, despite the fact that the strikes were all over by the 9th of November. And in theory, she didn't actually have to go on strike at all. It was a WGA strike, and Lively is not a member of WGA. SAG-AFTRA is a different story. But we know she joined her husband. Now, the strikes were lifted on the 9th of November. Lively could have come back at that point. She chose not to. Why? Well, the next round of filming, the resumption of the filming of Deadpool and Wolverine was announced on the 9th of November. Conveniently, coincidentally, Lively then sent her 17-point extortion letter. So, yeah. But this is one of the earliest text message exchange where Lively saying, right, I want Wayfarer to change all of this, for me, work, change their entire schedule to fit around me. And, there are messages, Warren Zavala, I just need to write to Jamie, haven't done anything. But, they are indicating, Justin Stone, her manager, I don't believe is WME, but, both of these guys are kind of indicating like, well, look, we'll go and talk to the studio. Now, in and of itself, it's not a big deal. But it is the first indication that Blake Lively has requested something that, she even says there, Justin is being very kind and supportive. he'd also say he'd make his best effort to consider, but no promises because there are a lot of factors like location and cast. So she acknowledges that Wayfair, one, Justin is supportive, not fat shaming her, but is supportive, and that he has already, promised that he will do his best. He will consider the request, but he's got to go and speak to others because they need to factor in a lot more, as many other things to factor in beyond what Blake Lively wants, which is fair because, when you get locations set and timings, there's a lot of people that affects. It's moving around equipment, you need permits, etc., etc. A huge amount of work and quite often money goes into setting filming schedules. So you can't just append it and say, well, I'm not going to come in today. I'll come in and I'll do it tomorrow. It is just not that simple. Blake Lively is acting like it is, but that is not the case at all. And really, if she is to, declare herself an A-list actor, then she should know better. My opinion. So that is the first indication that Blake Lively just needs to say, I want this. And these guys, even though Blake Lively has said, I've already spoken to Justin, and he's going to go away and try and put it to people and to have a conversation to see what they can do. These two guys are still like, well, we'll contact them. Why do you need to contact them? He's already been contacted. He's already said he's going to go and talk to other people who are important to making that decision. So why do these two guys who have nothing to do with this feel the need to say, well, we'll contact the studio? Okay. Moving on. Okay, so the next time we really see any interference is it's in August 2023. And what we see there is this is over the dailies. And basically Blake Lively is not happy that she's approached Justin Baldoni to see if she can get access to the dailies. Justin Baldoni has said no. Or he's pushed back gently. He hasn't said a direct no. He's just been a bit like struggling to say no. But I think he put it to the other producers like Jamie and Alex Sachs, and they were like, no, this is not an appropriate request. This is, it's an inappropriate request. So she's gone running to Warren Zavala, her agent again at WME, just to clarify. And she's kind of moaning about that. And like, well, I thought I was a producer. She knows damn well she's not a producer, by the way, because she asked for producer credit and got executive producer, which is not the same thing. And this is an interference. Warren Zavala has actually gone behind Justin Baldoni's back and Jamie Heath's and gone to Alex Sachs and is pushing Alex Sachs to allow Blake Lively to have access to the dailies. Justin Baldoni had given her a small portion, which in fairness was actually Alex Sachs's idea, was, just give her, a couple of hours worth. It was something like that. Like don't give her it all, but give her a small portion. She should be happy with that. Well, Blake Lively got that, wasn't happy with it. And now Warren Zavala is going to Alex Sachs and saying, basically, it would just be better if you just show Blake everything. And he says, Alex mentioned that he'd sent you some footage. I told her I hadn't heard that, but I'm flagging that they're happy with the assembly. The smart thing to do is to preemptively show you what they've seen, not a portion. So that is what he has gone back and said to Alex Sachs. Now, Lively is kind of lying here and saying, well, he sent a scene. That's not true. He'd actually sent her quite a bit. I think it was like 6 hours worth. And Lively's obviously okay with Warren Zavala going to Alex Sachs over this because she says, well, what was her response? Zavala says she agreed, but I told her I would talk to you and get back to her. So there's no, there's no, I'll go and speak to Justin, I'll speak to Jamie. Not that he should even be doing that, but this annoys me because they're not even doing that. They are going behind Justin and Jamie's back and going to Alex Sachs. And it's frustrating because while she is a producer, Alex Sachs is not, you know, the studio. And she can't just override, Justin Baldoni and Jamie Heath's decisions. So, and then as we go further on, Blake Lively's threatening, well, if he doesn't show me the dailies, then, I'm not going to engage with this film. So yeah. And then Warren Zavala's, he continues and talks about how he's going to call and, say stuff to her. Okay. And he has actually managed to talk them round because he says at the top, they're going to show it to you. I just hope they're preemptive. So, eventually we do get that. And then, he also then says, I told Alex you're going to have notes prior to any additional photography, do the smart thing. So he's basically threatened Alex Sachs as well. And then we got they're all clowns. Warren Zavala then sends this image, and am I the Messiah? To which Lively then says, brilliant work, Zavala. Zavala should not be doing any of this brilliant work. So, yeah. So that's the next part of, I guess, the interference. Let's continue. So up until this point, we've kind of been dealing with Blake Lively and her agent. Now, remember, that, like I said at the start, the unique thing about the position of WME is that they were representing both sides. And here we have Justin talking to his WME representative, Danny Greenberg. And, there's, I'm not going to read all the messages again, but I mean, Danny Greenberg, good you didn't go to her house. That's insanity. This whole thing is insanity. You have everyone behind you. Well, that weren't true. And everyone knows how incredibly well you are handling this sicko. Greenberg also says there has to be a line. He's also offering to talk to Todd Black. By this point, this is just before the penthouse meeting. He's also offering to speak to Warren Zavala as well. Yeah, and then at the end, at the bottom here, then Greenberg says you'll get more out of the edit than you think. That wasn't true. And we need to do everything in our power to keep her away. Now, this is not evidence of WME interfering, but what it does tell me is how much WME were aware. And the problem is, right, is we will need to look at and compare the two different agents and what they were saying and what they were actively doing. Because on the one hand, you've got Warren Zavala, and bearing in mind, this is just we're at this point, we're just going into January 2024. We've done the first phase of shooting. Again, this is just the information we have. There is likely to be more information because the discovery will be much wider than this, but these are just exhibits that have been attached to motions that have been filed. And that is why we're getting to see them. But there will be far more messages than this. But at the moment, what we're looking at is Warren Zavala, Blake Lively's agent for WME, is actively interfering and going and speaking to Alex Sachs or saying, I'm going to speak to Jamie and get them to push this, this, and this, right? We've not even got into the worst of it yet. But then you got Danny Greenberg saying, oh my God, this is terrible. You need to draw a line. It's mixed messages. You've got two agents acting for the same organization, representing both these people, doing completely polar opposite things that are incompatible. Let's continue our little journey. Okay, so now we're into July 2024. We're kind of in the midst of the battle over the cut and the promotion and marketing and everything. This is Ryan Reynolds contacting Patrick Whitesell. And they are talking to now. Patrick Whitesell is he's a chairman at WME. And he's basically, they've been bouncing back and forth. Can I call you? I need to call you, right? So they've obviously had a call, right? This is on the 13th of July. So at 12:32, I'll call you. Ryan Reynolds says, I'm going to call you. Patrick Whitesell says, yeah, happy, fine. Just under 2 hours later, Whitesell texts, then obviously following up from a call. We'll figure this out. And then Ryan Reynolds is, I think the guy needs to comprehend the stakes, etc., etc. Talking to Danny. So he's asking Patrick Whitesell to talk to Danny Greenberg. I want to enlist Danny to help. Bear in mind, this is Justin's agent, right? And he's talking to the head of WME and saying, can you get Justin's agent to help me and Blake? And demanding things like all these, 15-page apology letters to Blake and dozens of other people from the film. Literally comparing Justin Baldoni to being worse than Oliver Stone. Seriously? But basically, I mean, again, I appreciate this at the moment, right? This is Justin, this is Ryan kind of putting pressure on Patrick Whitesell, right? There's not, there is no message here that from Patrick Whitesell says, yeah, I'm going to do all of this. But the fact that he took Ryan Reynolds' call about this situation does suggest that, he is involved and he's discussing a situation which really has nothing to do with Ryan Reynolds. Then we go on to July 22nd. Yes, July 22nd, 2024. And these are text exchange between Danny Greenberg, Warren Zavala, and Patrick Whitesell. And they're basically just discussing, needing help with Blake. And this is kind of going into the run up to the premiere. And I mean, we don't see too much here, but they're obviously discussing what to do. The other thing that Greenberg's doing is he's relaying the position of Colleen Hoover as well. He does actually confirm that Blake is ringleading. That's his word, ringleading the other actors. Now, this becomes relevant, I think, later on, because what this does is it shows that WME were aware of what was really going on. And they stuck by Blake anyway and, involved themselves, interfered with processes. Let's see. And why that kind of becomes important, actually, is because in this next text exchange, which is it's before the premiere, actually, it's August the 4th. It's between Danny Greenberg and Patrick Whitesell. And you got this message here. My guess is if this blows up, Brian Reynolds will call you to make me clip our guy. So they're talking about what a problem Blake is. They need help with Blake, etc., etc. They know fine well. I mean, Danny Greenberg has been saying to Justin, "Don't worry, everything will be fine." But there are lines that need to be, drawn in the sand, and she can't be allowed to cross them. And then he's acknowledging here that Ryan Reynolds might actually call him and put pressure on him to drop Justin Baldoni. They're anticipating this, which is just absolutely wild to me that they're, considering this. Um, okay, and then we got August 9th. So this is obviously the date of the premiere. So again, it's just some. This is not heavy hitting particularly, but this is Warren Zavala, just chatting away with Blake, like, oh, numbers are great, etc., etc. And this is Zavala basically, supporting Blake, kind of propping her up, etc. Okay, but then we've got this. This is same day, the 9th of August. This is Ryan Reynolds and Warren Zavala now. And this is basically, it's a really long, Ryan Reynolds full of bullshit, long text messages. But just absolutely excoriating Baldoni and Heath, you know, all the terrible things that they've done. Sorry, I'm just flicking through just to see if there's anything I catch in there at all. Oh yes, Ange Giannetti and Todd Black are ineffectual elderly people. Okay. So this is just a whole absolute bullshit message about, fellow WME member, basically, Justin Baldoni, what a terrible way he is. How does Warren Zavala, agent at WME, respond? Well, he tells him that he's right, for a start. Very supportive. Okay. So, and yeah, Warren Zavala just absolutely talking shit. This guy's incredible ego, etc., etc. I hope this fraud shit weasel is exposed. That's why he's an egotistical shit weasel with a god complex. Has anyone told Warren Zavala that actually, when it comes to weasel, we associate Ryan Reynolds as being a weasel? Ryan Reynolds is saying Leslie, i.e. Leslie Sloan, should definitely engage the studio and fight back in any way necessary. Now, when we say studio, we're talking about Sony. Leslie should definitely engage the studio and fight back in any way necessary. Warren Zavala, I totally agree. I appreciate there was more there, but, Warren Zavala is also saying, that Blake Lively should go on record and, spill her guts on, her allegations. He says, yes, if she has to. Let's see how it plays out. He does kind of say, let's see how it plays out. By the time she's forced to say something, we should have all his cards out on on the table. I just read the article. I would imagine there isn't a lot of moves on his end here. We'll see. How is she doing? So now we're on to this unhinged rant. This is the 13th of August. This is a few days later again. Now Ryan Reynolds is basically kind of like, well, I'm very disappointed in the way that WME have, not held our corner, etc., etc., right? So it's a really long text. I'm not even going to talk about it because it's just bollocks. Patrick Whitesell, I completely understand this. You and Blake deserve the advocacy from us as agents. I hadn't been aware of all of this. What are you on about? Warren, Doug, and I had a conversation. We will be deploying in the morning with the town. Now, curious to know what that means. What does that mean with the town? I'm feeling like this is agency speak. And when he is saying the town, what that means is actors, representatives, producers, executives, influencers, people who shape perception. And that kind of suggests that there's, that they are going to amplify leverage. So that's how I kind of take that really. Where else is it? Sorry, it's just passing through all these words. Just words coming at me. Yeah, so that, I mean, that bothers me firstly. This is Patrick Whitesell now, right? Yeah, this is Patrick Whitesell. So as we know, right, he's chairman at WME. And he says, Warren, Doug, and I had a conversation tonight and we'll be deploying in the morning with the town. As you said, the most important thing here is that we don't let any of this have negative effect on you two professionally. And that all the studios, important buyers, etc., know the truth of it all. So Patrick Whitesell is like, yeah, don't worry, we're gonna, spread shit to everyone, all our contacts. We're gonna leverage our contacts, right? He's been discussing it with Warren Zavala. Warren Zavala has called Josh Greenstein and hung up on him after going crazy at him. He'd been working internally to arrange a call for Blake, with him, Tony. I'm not sure who Tony is, and Tom. Tom, we know, is Tom Rothman, the CEO of Sony. So they are going to the CEO of Sony now. Again, this is after the premiere, right? But let's remember the context here, that there was actually a sequel in the pipeline as well. So this is interfering with not just the first film technically, but also the second film. Let's just get through all this crap, see what else. Ryan Reynolds did not talk shit. I guess this is the, I want them to put something out. We want to see a draft of what they're putting out. Ryan Reynolds, I think we need to coordinate a cadence with a Sony statement and a Baldoni Heath statement. And it absolutely has to happen today. Yes, agreed. We should also have a strategy call prior to your call with Sony. Why is Ryan Reynolds calling Sony first, eh? But also, why is Warren Zavala advocating and encouraging Ryan Reynolds to call Sony about a film that Ryan Reynolds has absolutely shit all to do with? Like, that would be like my husband, or well, me calling my husband's employer and saying, I want to have a call with you. I'm not happy about this person that my husband works with, and I'm going to write a statement. And if you don't put out a statement and that other person doesn't put out a statement saying that, my husband is just the best thing in the world, then I'm going to let all hell break. It would be entirely inappropriate to do that. Most normal people don't. And whilst I understand this industry is not your average day, 9 to 5 office industry, it is absolutely wild that Blake Lively is talking about, well, we want the film to have the theme of empowering women. I've advocated for this. I've done this. It's all me, 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 if you read her PGA letter. But then behind the scenes, her husband's having to do everything, including writing a rooftop scene. Because for some reason, she couldn't do it herself, even though she had permission to have a go. This case, it really gets to you. Okay, so we have, what else? Is there something else? Okay. Then we have this. Having already been speaking to Alex Sachs covertly about trying to get Blake Lively access to dailies that she'd already been told, look, Here's what I'm prepared to give you. I'm not prepared to give you any more by Justin Baldoni. Warren Zavala is now talking again to Alex Sachs saying, will you, go on record to say, to back up all these claims? And Ryan Reynolds is now pissed because Alex Sachs said no. To her credit, Alex Sachs was like, no, I didn't actually see anything. She told me this happened, that happened. So, just to highlight this, Ryan Reynolds says Alex isn't willing to speak, even on background. Zavala, having gone and spoken to her, she was definitely walking it back with me and Jamie. But the crux of the issue in terms of this article is that she truly believes Blake and Jenny. So she believes them, but she did not witness instances that they shared with her. She herself was yelled at, in her opinion, and, treated poorly, in her opinion. She thinks that they're assholes. But she can't corroborate what basically Blake and Jenny are saying. She can't offer herself as a first-hand witness to say, yeah, no, I witnessed it myself. They were shitheads. They were creeps. That was it. And Ryan's like still pushing issue. Well, why can't she speak on background to that? That seems relevant. Zabala's like, yeah, I've got the same concern. I don't think any of her colleagues are advocating for her. Well, I wonder why that is. Because none of it happened. Ugh, right. I mean, he says people have reached out to B who worked with him on other projects. So that'd be Claire Ayub, who, again, had no problem whatsoever. Claims that she had him banished from the set. She didn't. It's just absolutely a piss take. And then we've got this message, right? These are little sidebars here. Yeah, I will get to the point about the tortuous interference. It's just noticing these things, right? This entire Ryan Reynolds message, yeah, is not even Ryan Reynolds. It's not Ryan Reynolds. Why would Ryan Reynolds be writing and saying he bites my lip during a kissing scene, despite that not being talked about at all? Why would Ryan Reynolds be saying we have competing cuts because his first cut included simulated penetration of a 15-year-old girl, not in the book or script? It was in the book, but she didn't read it. The only person who had a competing cut was Blake. And why on earth would Ryan Reynolds be writing this? Ugh. Bear with. My mouse isn't working. Instead, the conversation becomes what a mean girl I am. And this. God, why is my mouse not working? I can't get my mouse to highlight this. This is really annoying. Basically, it says here, the next line down. I am so sorry. My hair care brand launched in August. Right, so I can highlight one word. I'm so sorry. My hair care brand launched in August. Well, Ryan Reynolds, as far as I know, doesn't have a hair care line. Blake Lively has got hold of Ryan Reynolds' phone and is writing this message as Ryan Reynolds. It's weird. It's weird because the last message is at 10:26, and that is Ryan Reynolds. Then we have another message at 12:40, which is clearly Blake Lively because she's writing about herself as in first person on Ryan Reynolds' phone. And then we have another message a few more hours later, like nearly 4 hours later, 3.5 hours later, where it's clearly gone back to Warren Zavala has actually responded and is like, "Oh, well, people want to do more movies with you. We love you." And then we're back to Ryan Reynolds. Yeah. And then we're moving forward a bit now. This is the 18th, so it's a few more days forward. Ryan Reynolds, Warren Zavala. Again, Warren Zavala is speaking to Tom Rothman. He's also speaking to Josh Greenstein. They were talking about killing articles. Where else? Sony is saying they're trying to kill an article, and Warren Zavala said, "Well, that's not good enough. They need to own the narrative around all of this is untrue." And then he points out that Tom owes him. Let's keep going. They are talking about, that's the leverage. Sorry, my kids are off school, so you might have heard them there. And then they're bringing in Ari Emanuel. Oh, we're going to bring in Ari tomorrow and have him give his good friend Tom a call. So now they're actively this is where the interference is with Sony, right? Is that all these huge players at WME are coordinating and collaborating and colluding, and then they're going to the top of the chain at Sony and saying, right, you owe me a favor. What the fuck is that? That's not why you should be calling. You owe me one. I'm going to get Ari Emanuel to come and punch your lights out. That kind of shit. It's just ridiculous. Ryan Reynolds, yeah, please, all hands on deck. Zavala, call me, hung up with Tom. So he's he's already had a conversation with Tom Rothman. Zavala says, I'm hesitant to put it in writing, but the AD issue is true. I haven't spoken to her about this issue, but he is saying they have to assume there is a paper trail on the Wayfarer side. It was B who wanted her fired. Well, we've already know it was B who wanted her fired. We've seen that paper trail. We've seen it with Ange Giannetti. Ryan Reynolds is not even aware of this, by the sounds of it. We argued about a statement which he both said isn't possible due to liability, and getting Tony on the record to support her and speak to the marketing issue was big for them. However, carried around the world, they didn't combat the fundamental issue. We left it at that. He's putting himself in the studio in a position with you and Blake legally. There is exposure on both sides for him. I will have Ari talk to him, but I do think this is people coming forward in support of her is our way through, regardless. I have to assume that they have a cadre of things that they plan to utilize within the bounds of protection to make her look bad. And then Ryan Reynolds is like, yeah, but Sony needs to speak to the marketing and frame it the way I mentioned in that text. I don't see any way, shape, or form that it would put them in a bad position. And they have it within their power. So Ryan Reynolds is like, yeah, well, ignore the truth. Just, frame it so she doesn't look bad. Or no, it's not frame it so it doesn't make Blake Lively look bad. It's frame it so it makes Wayfarer look bad. Yeah? It's absolutely ridiculous. And yes, the AD was fired. She wasn't keeping people on set safe. That's just ridiculous. Ryan Reynolds says it was almost part of the return to work document, but they hired a new AD. And then Warren Zavala says, well, that's what I'm waiting for. Tom said the same. claims they addressed the marketing in the article. It's about getting Tara and Josh to understand the difference. So they're still talking about Warren Zavala. Let us keep leaning in. We will unleash Ari. So there we go. We will unleash Ari. And this is all at the behest of Ryan Reynolds, right? This isn't even Blake Lively at this point. This is all Ryan Reynolds is interfering, is goading Warren Zavala to interfere and go up the chain and get Ari Emanuel. Now, we haven't actually seen any messages from... Sorry, I had to take a brief moment there because my Dexcom went off to let me know that I was in a hypo. So, it's all happening today. Yeah, so they are going up the chain, and weaponizing Ari Emanuel. Okay, yeah. Can we go full Ari on Tom? So they want to weaponize Ari Emanuel against Tom Rothman. That's just fucking wild. Warren Zavala says, though, he will willfully go full Ari on all of them. And they're strategizing, and I'm not part of the strategy going forward, and it's opaque to me, but I would think these people should be aware of these letters. Okay. Let's see what else there is. Okay, so this leads me nicely on then to this last bit. This is the leaked interview that was lost, and then they Colonel Kurtz miraculously managed to get a copy of it and put it all in a video nicely for us. So if we just play a little snippet of that, and then we'll just see from Ari Emanuel's is from his own words, right? We can just look at what happened. I'm just going to I'll just start this bit again. I'm not sure about audio. So, I'm hoping that the sound worked on this now because the video I tried to use for the Colleen Hoover one yesterday didn't, so I had to put a link in the comments. I will probably put a link to this video as well anyway, because it's always great to listen to it. It's not the greatest sound quality, but it honestly, considering the sheer luck for Kurtz to have got hold of this, it's better than nothing, and it's enough that you can hear it, I guess. And you can hear exactly what's been said. But yeah, exactly that, right? So the ride or die comment, I fired him. I'm a ride or die for Blake and Ryan. Oh, and by the way, I'm on my way to go and watch their SNL performance. So that kind of concludes let's look at the evidence. So if we're looking at tortious interference, and I appreciate this is quite a lengthy video now. So yeah, they absolutely knew that there was a valid contract, right? Without any doubt. Sorry, the valid contract exists, and WME they had full knowledge of it. They would have had better knowledge than most people, actually, because they represented all of the parties, all of them. That'd be Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni, and there was also a separate business side of WME that represented Wayfarer. They would have been aware of the whole bake-off thing. But it's not just a bake-off in this case. There are multiple things. So there are multiple contracts. And there was a lot of information there. Intentional acts, I would argue, designed to induce breach or disruption. There was awareness of improper pressure, right? So this is not necessarily just at the start, like where the other videos I've done have been mainly looking at who interfered with the bake-off process, but this is more holistically across the board, and also going forward, like, compromising the integrity of, the potential sequel. It starts with us. WME were definitely, they acknowledged that Blake Lively was ringleading cast pressure. They were aware of improper pressure. They were even participating in managing it. Danny Greenberg's text as well, oh, no, you're right. You shouldn't have gone. I'm glad you didn't go to her house on your own. There has to be a line drawn. He was aware. He also sent messages to Patrick Whitesell saying, this is just getting out of hand. She's asking a lot. We need to manage this situation. And for me, it's clear demonstration that they failed to protect their other client, i.e. Justin Baldoni. They were also aware and talking about Colleen Hoover's threat not to attend the premiere. They were discussing all of this with the studio, i.e. Sony. They were leveraging people like Ari Emanuel or Warren Zavala's, Tom Rothman owes me a favor. That's quite devastating evidence, actually. Clipping our guy, that message as well. They were anticipating pressure from Ryan Reynolds to fire Justin Baldoni. And it was actually prepared almost. I got the impression it was actually prepared to act against Justin Baldoni, their own client. Like Ryan Reynolds may call me to clip our guy. We'll have to discuss. I mean, they were actually thinking about this. It was not, oh my God, we cannot be, we can't allow this to happen. No, we've got to, put a stop to it and push back in the strongest sense. There was none of that. It was like, well, Ryan Reynolds might call to, give us a nudge, and we'll have to have a conversation. What? Why are you even considering this? They were also participating in a pressure campaign by leveraging their own connections. Talk of going to the town to make sure, all the producers, executives, various people, big names, all knew the truth. Whose truth? Ryan Reynolds? Blake Lively's? Doing pretty much anything to make sure WME comes out of this not looking bad. To some degree, they were prepared to take down Sony as well. Um, WME was they were actively involved in the political management of this dispute, but there is so much evidence that they were not neutral. They were influencing the studio's decision-making environment. I mean, they were calling Josh Greenstein and shouting at him. They were calling the chairman, Tim Rossman, and pulling favors. That's intentional interference. Okay. Actual disruption of the contract. So they were obviously, I mean, WME they were pushing right from the start to change and upend things like filming schedules. Even from the like I say at the start, Blake Lively had already asked Justin Baldoni, had already approached him. Justin Baldoni was, going to talk to other people, but WME were like, well, we'll call them. There's no need for it. Same with the dailies. They were going to Alex Sachs. They went to Alex Sachs after the premiere as well, like to try and get on record, get her to corroborate Blake Lively's version of events, and failed because Alex Sachs, rightly so, said, I didn't actually witness those things. I believe Blake Lively, but I didn't actually see him myself. They compromised the neutrality of the Bake Off, in my opinion, as well, because they were advocating and pushing Blake's side, like to get the dailies to get her into the edit room. We see a lot more evidence from Sony on that side, but there was definitely WME pushing in the background. And like I say, there will be evidence that exists beyond the messages that are publicly available to us at the moment. I have no doubt that WME would have been pushing Blake Lively on this and advocating for her. And you got the occasional message from Danny Greenberg telling Justin Baldoni, well, you shouldn't give her an inch. We need to manage Blake. We need to power her down, so on and so forth. But in reality, Warren Zavala, his colleague, was pushing back harder on Blake Lively's side. So there was a whole escalation and disruption. It was the fact that Danny Greenberg also entertained the idea of Justin Baldoni and Jamie Heath having to put out a Ryan Reynolds drafted statement taking responsibility for everything. Why? Why would they even consider that? Because they were aware of what was going on. We can see that in the messages. They were aware that Blake Lively was overstepping, extorting, threatening, etc., etc. Under California law, the requirement is that the interference be a substantial factor, but not the sole cause. And I do think that there is a lot here that would actually support that. Because there was reputational harm to Justin Baldoni. Damages. So it's arguable that WME's interference did contribute to a loss of some of the creative authority. It contributed to reputational harm to Justin Baldoni, economic harm to Wayfarer, disruption of various processes, which would have included things like the Bake Off and the premiere, to be honest. I'm pretty sure they interfered with that. Again, there is nothing direct, but you can see the push and pull. Forced concessions. There was an attempt to get forced concessions and a compromised contractual process. So what is problematic in particular? So I do think there is potential for a claim. We would need more evidence of, specific processes. But what is specifically fascinating about this situation is the dual representation. Is WME represented both Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. And what happened here is it created divided loyalties, fiduciary obligations, heightened duties, and an increased scrutiny. And the problem is when an agency acts against one client to benefit another, courts really don't like that. They are quite harsh about that. But the things like internal admissions, the clip our guy thing, but when Ryan Reynolds calls us to clip our guy, we're going to actually consider it. I think that for me is one of the most damaging pieces because that's how far they were prepared to go. Is it didn't matter who was in the right or who was in the wrong. I mean, they had all that huff and puff about the story about the firing of the first AD, and then it turned out, they found out subsequently, oh, actually, the story's true, but it didn't sway anything. Like, oh, well, yeah, okay, but she had to go because she wasn't keeping the set safe. That's the starting point was that's not true. They're blaming Blake for that, but it's not true. Then they found out actually it was Blake's fault, and it's like, well, let's just stop and reframe that. Yeah, she had to go because she wasn't keeping the set safe. So they would have they would have twisted anything anyway to fit the narrative. It didn't matter whose fault was what. The issue for me is WME wasn't a bystander. They were relaying threats. They were managing cast pressure. They were coordinating with the studio. They were anticipating pressure from Ryan Reynolds, and they were participating in a political strategy. And because they had no contractual authority over certain processes, like the actual making of the film, the production, the pre-production, the post-production, that wasn't where they didn't have any contractual authority over that. But yet they were actively inserting themselves. And I understand the whole component of advocating for your client. The problem is this organization also represented Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer, and there was not the level of advocacy that there should have been. That would have been the time to have taken a step back and say, look, we need to be neutral on this. They didn't. Yeah, so I think that's where I am. And then again, that interview at the end, courtesy of Colonel Kurtz, Ari Emanuel admitting, I'm a ride or die. I fired him. But isn't that what Warren Zavala said he was going to do? He was going to get Ari to go full Ari. And then you've got, when people are calling up Tom Rothman and, getting in his ear, as Matt Damon and Lucy Damon did, then it starts to compromise the possibility and integrity of the sequel. So these are just some thoughts. I think there is potential for a claim. It is a bit difficult because, like I say, there are contracts, like the contract between Blake Lively and WME, Ryan Reynolds and WME, Justin Baldoni and WME, Wayfarer and WME. We haven't seen those contracts. I mean, in theory, there may well have been a fire at will clause in them. So the actual firing of Justin Baldoni from WME could be perfectly legal, and most likely probably is. But that in itself is not the issue for me. The issue is Ryan Reynolds interfered and pushed WME to do that. The issue for me is also that WME were interfering with Alex Sachs, with Sony, and leveraging and talking about, we're going to go to the town and we're going to tell everyone this and start influencing things. And they were not neutral at all. Given that they were representing, all three of these people in this, they were not neutral. And that is a problem. I'm going to wrap up and leave it there, and I will come back, and I will be doing the Sony version, which won't be tortious interference. It will be breach of contract.